She followed the boy who was stealing from her. When she found out why, her heart broke. The autumn air carried a crisp chill as Megan Carter flipped the sign on the diner door to closed. The familiar clang of pots being washed in the kitchen and the hum of the diner's neon sign were comforting reminders of routine. Crestwood was a small town where not much happened, at least not to the outside world. For Megan, life was a different story. As the clock ticked closer to 10 p.m., Megan began her usual cleanup. The scent of coffee lingered in the air, and the radio played soft country tunes in the background. Wiping down the counter, she paused to glance out the window. The streets were deserted, save for the faint flicker of a streetlight struggling against the wind. Quiet as ever, she murmured to herself, reaching for the mop. Just as she started toward the back kitchen, a faint clatter made her freeze in place. It was coming from outside, the alley where the trash cans were kept. Megan frowned. It wasn't uncommon for stray animals to poke around, but something about this sound felt different. She moved cautiously to the back door and peeked through the narrow window. Nothing. The alley was cloaked in darkness, with only the distant buzz of a flickering street lamp to pierce the gloom. Megan dismissed it as her imagination and went back to her tasks. Minutes later, another noise, a soft shuffle, followed by the distinct creak of a lid being lifted. This time, her curiosity got the better of her. She grabbed the flashlight she kept under the counter and swung the door open. The beam of light sliced through the dark, landing on one of the dumpsters. The lid wobbled slightly, and Megan's pulse quickened. "Hello," she called out, her voice firm but tinged with unease. For a moment, there was only silence. Then a shadow darted out, small and quick, barely visible in the dim light. Megan's heart leapt. It was too big to be an animal. She stepped forward, her hand tightening on the flashlight. "Hey, stop," she shouted, but the figure was already gone, vanishing into the night. Her chest tightened with a mix of fear and curiosity. Someone had been there, someone who didn't want to be seen. Megan stood in the alley, her breath clouding in the chill, wondering what secrets Crestwood's quiet streets were hiding. Megan couldn't shake the feeling. As she locked the diner and started her walk home, her thoughts kept circling back to the shadowy figure in the alley. Whoever it was had been rummaging through trash, but why? Prank? Desperation? The quiet streets of Crestwood felt unusually still as Megan walked briskly, her hands tucked into her jacket against the chilly breeze. The dim glow of the diner's neon sign faded behind her, but the unease lingered. She wasn't prone to jumping at shadows, but tonight was different. As she rounded the corner near the park, she saw a flash of movement out of the corner of her eye. Her breath caught. They're by the playground. A small figure was crouched low near a bench, stuffing something into a worn backpack. It was the same shadowy presence she'd seen earlier, no doubt about it. This time, she wasn't going to let it slip away. "Hey," Megan called out, her voice firm but not angry. She quickened her pace, hoping to close the distance before the figure bolted. The boy froze for a split second, his head whipping around to look at her. In the faint light from the street lamp, Megan saw his face, young, maybe 10 or 11, with hollow cheeks and wide, frightened eyes. Before she could say another word, he took off, his small frame disappearing into the park's shadows. "Wait, I'm not going to hurt you," Megan shouted, but the boy didn't stop. Without thinking, she sprinted after him. Her sneakers crunched on gravel as she weaved through the darkened park, her breath coming in sharp bursts. The boy darted through a gap in the fence and down a narrow alley, quick and sure-footed. Megan followed, adrenaline propelling her forward. After several frantic turns, she lost sight of him. Gasping for air, she stopped in the middle of the alley, her flashlight beam bouncing off crumbling brick walls and overgrown weeds. "Why are you running?" she whispered to no one, frustration and concern knotting in her chest. As she turned to head back, her foot nudged something on the ground, a crumpled piece of fabric. She crouched and picked it up. It was a child's hoodie, thin and frayed, with a dark stain near the sleeve. Megan's stomach twisted. Something wasn't right, and she wasn't going to let it go. Megan's fingers tightened around the hoodie as a wave of unease washed over her. The fabric was damp, its edges frayed, and the stain, though faded, was unmistakably blood. The chill in the air deepened, creeping into her bones. "What happened to you?" she murmured, staring down the alley where the boy had vanished. This wasn't just a case of a hungry kid scavenging for food. Megan could feel it. Something was wrong, and she was determined to find out what. Clutching the hoodie, she made her way back to the diner. The streets of Crestwood felt eerily silent, the only sound her own footsteps echoing against the empty sidewalks. Her mind raced with questions. Who was the boy? Why was he running? And where had the blood come from? Back at the diner, Megan locked the door behind her and sat at the counter, turning the hoodie over in her hands. She spotted a small, faded patch sewn into the inside collar, a stitched name. Squinting under the dim light, she made out the letters. Liam, she whispered, the name feeling strangely heavy on her tongue. She rummaged through the lost and found box under the counter, pulling out a notebook and pen. If this boy had been through something terrible, someone had to be looking for him, or someone should be. Scribbling down the details, Megan resolved to call the sheriff's office in the morning. But as she stared at the name on the hoodie, thought struck her. If Liam was hiding, would he trust the authorities? Crestwood wasn't a town known for its warmth toward outsiders, and Megan had seen firsthand how the system could fail vulnerable people. She sighed, leaning her head in her hands. For now, she'd keep the hoodie and watch the streets. If he came back, she'd be ready. The next day, as the morning sun painted the diner in soft hues, Megan stood by the window, staring out at the empty parking lot. She felt a gnawing urgency to act, but no clear plan. Her shift dragged on, and she couldn't shake the image of Liam's frightened eyes. Then, just after sunset, movement caught her attention, a flash of that same small figure darting past the diner's side alley. Megan grabbed the hoodie and ran outside without hesitation. Megan sprinted into the alley, her heart pounding as the figure darted into the shadows. This time, she wasn't letting him slip away. Liam, she called, her voice echoing against the brick walls. The boy froze mid-step and turned slowly, his wide eyes filled with panic. Megan held up the hoodie, her breath visible in the cool air. I'm not here to hurt you, she said, keeping her voice soft. I just want to help. Liam hesitated, his small frame trembling as if he were deciding whether to run or trust her. Megan took a cautious step forward, the hoodie still outstretched. This is yours, isn't it? She asked gently. I found it last night. Please, let me help. Liam's eyes flicked between her and the hoodie, and then to the darkening sky. Finally, as if the weight of his fear was too much, he gave a small nod. Megan let out a breath she didn't realize she was holding. Okay, she said, kneeling to his level. Are you hurt? Do you need food? The boy's lips quivered, but before he could answer, he grabbed her hand and pulled her toward the edge of the alley. It's not me, he whispered hoarsely. It's her. She needs help. Megan's stomach twisted. Who? Ellie. My sister. His voice cracked as he led her toward an abandoned warehouse at the edge of town. The structure loomed like a ghost in the fading light, its broken windows and rusted doors bearing the scars of neglect. Liam stopped at a side entrance and pushed it open, the metal creaking loudly. Inside, Megan's breath caught. A little girl, no older than 5, was lying on a pile of blankets. Her face was pale, her body fragile and thin. She clutched a worn stuffed rabbit to her chest, her shallow breaths barely audible in the cavernous space. Ellie, Liam whispered, kneeling beside her and brushing a strand of hair from her face. I brought someone to help. Megan knelt too, her chest tightening as she took in the girl's condition. Her skin was clammy, her lips dry and cracked. Megan's years of struggling with her own kids' fevers and colds told her Ellie was dangerously ill. How long has she been like this? Megan asked, trying to keep her voice steady. Days, Liam admitted, tears pooling at his eyes. I didn't know where else to go. Megan's heart broke. These 2 children were utterly alone, trying to survive in a world that had abandoned them. We need to get her to a hospital, Megan said, her voice firm. But Liam shook his head violently. No, they'll take us away. They'll separate us, he cried, clinging to Ellie's hand. Megan froze, understanding the terror in his voice. There was more to this story than she'd realized, something deeper and darker than she was prepared for. But one thing was clear, she couldn't leave them here. Megan stared at Ellie, her heart racing. The girl's frail frame and labored breathing made it clear she wouldn't survive much longer without medical help. But Liam's terror wasn't just fear. It was the kind of desperation that came from experience. Someone had already failed these kids, and Megan wasn't about to make the same mistake. Liam, she said gently, turning to the boy, I understand you're scared, but your sister is very sick. She needs a doctor. They'll take her from me, he whispered, his voice trembling. They'll take us both. Please, don't make me lose her too. Megan hesitated, her thoughts swirling. What had happened to these children to make them so afraid? As Liam held Ellie's hand tighter, Megan made a snap decision. All right, she said softly, placing a reassuring hand on his shoulder. We won't go to the hospital. Not yet. But we can't stay here either. Liam's eyes widened. Where will we go? My house, Megan replied firmly. It's not far. I can keep you safe there and take care of Ellie. For a moment, Liam didn't move. Then he gave a small nod, his trust fragile but real. Good, Megan said, standing and pulling off her jacket. She wrapped it gently around Ellie, whose small body seemed to weigh nothing as she scooped her into her arms. Let's go. The walk back to Megan's house was tense. Every sound, every distant car engine or snapping branch, made Liam flinch. Megan kept a firm grip on Ellie, her mind racing with questions. Why were they hiding? Where were their parents? When they reached her modest home, Megan unlocked the door and hurried them inside. She laid Ellie on the couch and turned to Liam. Do you trust me enough to tell me what's going on? She asked softly. Liam's lips trembled as he looked away. We ran away, he admitted after a long silence. Armoshi's gone. He's dangerous. Megan's blood ran cold. Who's he? Liam didn't answer. He just grabbed Ellie's stuffed rabbit and clung to it like a lifeline. Megan knelt beside him, her voice firm. Liam, whoever he is, he's not here now. You're safe with me. But I need to know, where are we running from? Before Liam could answer, headlights cut through the window, casting long shadows across the room. Megan froze. Someone was outside. Get to the back room, she whispered urgently, her heart pounding. Go. Megan urged, pushing Liam gently toward the hallway. He grabbed Ellie's stuffed rabbit and ran, his small footsteps barely making a sound on the hardwood floor. Megan waited until she heard the soft click of the bedroom door before turning her attention back to the headlights outside. The car idled for a moment, its engine rumbling like a distant storm. Megan's pulse quickened. This wasn't a coincidence. Someone was looking for them. She grabbed her phone from the counter, her hand trembling as she dialed 911. Before she could press call, the car door slammed and heavy footsteps echoed up her driveway. Knock, knock. The sound was firm, deliberate, and chilling. Megan's breath hitched as she backed away from the door. Who's there? She called, her voice steadier than she felt. The reply came low and sharp. Open the door, Megan. I know they're in there. Her blood ran cold. How did he know her name? Who are you? She demanded, clutching her phone tightly. The man on the other side chuckled, a sound that sent shivers down her spine. Let's just say I'm the reason you're babysitting 2 runaways. Open the door, and no one has to get hurt. Megan's stomach twisted. This had to be the he Liam had mentioned. She couldn't see his face, but his tone carried a dangerous edge. You need to leave, Megan said, forcing as much authority into her voice as she could muster. The man banged on the door harder this time, rattling the frame. You got no idea what you're dealing with, lady. Those kids? They're mine. And if you don't hand them over, I'll come in and take them myself. Megan's heart pounded. She glanced toward the hallway where Liam and Ellie were hiding, her mind racing. I've already called the police, she bluffed. They'll be here any second. The man paused, his heavy breathing audible even through the door. That's a shame, he muttered, his voice dripping with menace. Guess I'll have to make this quick. The sound of metal scraping made her heart stop. He was trying to force the lock. Megan's hand shook as she grabbed a nearby kitchen knife. If you come in here, I swear I'll... The man kicked the door, the wood cracking under the force. Megan's grip tightened on the knife, her pulse racing as she prepared for the worst. Then, in the distance, the faint sound of sirens. The man froze, muttered a curse, and turned back toward his car. Megan ran to the window, watching as he sped off into the night, taillights disappearing around the corner. Her knees buckled, and she leaned against the wall, struggling to catch her breath. The sirens grew louder, and within moments, flashing blue and red lights illuminated her street. But even as relief washed over her, Megan knew this wasn't over. Whoever that man was, he wasn't going to stop. The police car screeched to a halt outside Megan's house, and 2 officers quickly approached the front door, their flashlights cutting through the dark. Megan pulled it open, her face pale, and her hands still shaking from the encounter. He was here, she said breathlessly. A man. He tried to force his way in. He said the kids were his. The officers exchanged a glance. Where are the children now? One of them asked, his voice calm but urgent. Megan hesitated, protective instincts kicking in. They're safe, she said carefully. But he said their lives were in danger. He seemed dangerous. Ma'am, the officer pressed, we need to talk to them. This could be serious. Megan nodded reluctantly and stepped aside. Stay here, she said softly to the children's door, then opened it a crack. Liam, it's okay. The police are here. They just want to talk. Liam emerged, his small frame tense and his face pale. He held Ellie's hand tightly, her stuffed rabbit tucked under his arm. Megan knelt beside him, brushing his hair back gently. You're safe now, she whispered. No one's going to hurt you. But I need you to be brave and tell them what's going on. With a shaky nod, Liam stepped forward. The officers crouched to his level. Can you tell us about the man who came here? One of them asked gently. Liam looked at Megan as if seeking her permission. She nodded, and he took a deep breath. He's not our dad, Liam began, his voice trembling. He worked with my mom back when she was alive. They were doing bad things. She didn't want him anymore, but he got angry. He said if she left, he'd hurt us. Megan's chest tightened as the boy continued, tears streaming down his cheeks. There was a fight, Liam said, his voice cracking. And one night, she just disappeared. He told me if I didn't do what he said, we'd disappear too. The officers exchanged a grim look. Do you know his name, Liam? His name is Frank, Liam whispered. And he'll never stop looking for us. Megan felt a chill run down her spine. Frank's determination to get the children wasn't just about control. It was about silencing them. Ma'am, the officer said, turning to Megan, we need to get these kids somewhere safe. We'll assign protective custody and look into this Frank character. But until then, keep your doors locked and don't let anyone in unless it's us. Megan nodded, but her gut told her the police couldn't move fast enough. As the officers left, she pulled Liam and Ellie close. We're going to figure this out, she promised. I won't let him hurt you. But deep down, Megan knew Frank wasn't going to stop. She needed a plan and fast. Megan barely slept that night. Every creak of the house, every gust of wind outside, made her heart race. Frank wasn't the type to back down, and the thought of him lurking out there sent chills down her spine. At dawn, Megan made a decision. She couldn't wait for the system to work. She had to take matters into her own hands. Liam, she said softly as he ate breakfast, his eyes still red from crying the night before. You said Frank worked with your mom. Do you know where he might be staying? Liam hesitated, glancing at Ellie before nodding. He used to meet people at a warehouse by the train tracks. It's where, he trailed off, his voice faltering. Megan leaned closer. It's okay, she said gently. You don't have to say it. But if we go there, maybe we can find something to stop him. Liam looked at her, his small face filled with both fear and trust. Okay, he whispered. With the kids bundled in the back seat, Megan drove cautiously toward the industrial district. The streets were nearly empty, the rising sun casting long shadows over the deserted warehouses. When they arrived, Megan parked a block away. Stay here, she told the kids, her voice firm. Lock the doors and don't open them for anyone but me. Understand. Liam clutched Ellie's hand and nodded. Be careful. Megan slipped the kitchen knife she'd grabbed earlier into her jacket pocket and approached the warehouse. The massive metal doors loomed like a warning, but she pushed through her fear and stepped inside. The air was heavy with the smell of oil and rust. Broken crates and graffiti-covered walls surrounded her, and her footsteps echoed ominously. Megan, a voice called out, smooth and mocking. I knew you'd come. Her blood ran cold as Frank emerged from shadows, a smirk on his face and a crowbar in his hand. You really don't know when to quit, do you? He sneered. I'm not afraid of you, Megan shot back, though her shaking hands betrayed her. The police are on to you. It's over, Frank. He laughed, a cold, menacing sound. You think the cops scare me? You think you can just walk into my world and win? Megan gritted her teeth. I'm here for those kids. You'll never get near them again. Frank lunged, the crowbar swinging through the air. Megan ducked just in time, her heart pounding as she scrambled backward. She reached into her jacket, pulling out the knife, and slashed wildly, grazing his arm. He roared in pain, his smirk replaced with fury. "You're going to regret that." Megan grabbed a rusted pipe from the floor and swung it with all her strength, knocking the crowbar from his hands. The impact echoed through the warehouse as Frank stumbled. "You're done," she yelled, her voice filled with a strength she hadn't known she had. The sound of sirens broke through the tension, growing louder by the second. Frank froze, his head snapping toward the doors. "You called them," he spat, his face twisted in rage. Megan held her ground. "You bet I did." Frank turned to run, but the warehouse doors burst open. Police officers swarmed in, shouting commands as Frank dropped to the ground, hands behind his head. Megan sagged against the wall, her breath coming in gasps as relief flooded through her. Outside, Liam and Ellie ran to her, their faces filled with worry. Megan dropped to her knees, wrapping them in a tight hug. "It's over," she whispered, tears streaming down her face. "You're safe now." As the sun climbed higher in the sky, Megan watched the officers haul Frank away. Her chest still ached with the fear she'd felt. Her heart swelled with determination. For Liam and Ellie, this was just the beginning of a better life, and Megan would be there every step of the way. 2 months had passed since that terrifying night at the warehouse. Life had changed in ways Megan never imagined. The custody hearing had been tense, but with the evidence against Frank and Megan's testimony about the children's dire situation, the judge ruled in favor of keeping Liam and Ellie together under Megan's care. The decision brought tears to her eyes, but she knew this was only the beginning of their journey. Her once quiet home was now filled with the sounds of laughter, the clatter of toys, and the occasional sibling squabble. Liam had started school again, though the adjustment wasn't easy. Megan worked closely with his teachers to help him catch up, while Ellie, still recovering from her illness, spent her days with Megan, slowly regaining her strength. One evening, as the three of them sat together at the dinner table, Megan noticed how much brighter Liam's eyes looked and how Ellie's cheeks had started to fill out. It wasn't just food and safety, they had found something far more important: hope. "Megan." Liam's voice broke her thoughts. She looked up, smiling. "What is it, sweetheart? Are we staying here for good?" he asked, his voice cautious, as if afraid of the answer. Megan reached across the table and took his hand. "Yes, Liam. For as long as you want. This is your home." Ellie beamed, clutching her stuffed rabbit tightly. Liam's shoulders relaxed, and for the first time, Megan saw a glimmer of trust in his expression, a trust she'd worked so hard to earn. Later that night, as the kids slept, Megan stood by the window, looking out at the quiet street. The fear that had once gripped her home was gone, replaced by a sense of peace she hadn't felt in years. She thought about everything that had brought her here: the chase through the streets, the confrontation with Frank, the children's heartbreaking story. It hadn't been easy, and the scars would remain, but they were stronger now. Megan smiled softly to herself. She had lost so much in her life, but in saving Liam and Ellie, she had found something precious: a family. And for the first time in a long time, the future felt bright. If this story moved you, leave a comment below and let us know your thoughts. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell for more incredible stories. Thanks for watching.